It's good now. We are seeing the website, but it's good now.
Okay. And we would like to present this presentation named The Hand Talk App and Teaching English to Brazilian Deaf Students. For this event, the fourth symposium of the Southern Ontario Universities, hosted by University of Toronto. And I'd like to start my presentation with the agenda of what we're going to communicate tonight. And we have the objective. We'll talk a little bit about the inclusion of deaf students in regular schools in Brazil. Also, we're going to highlight Libras, the Brazilian Sign Language, talk a little bit about the deaf students and the teaching of English in the regular school. This app specifically, the Hand Talk, the research methodology, a piece of analysis, and also a few results that we have until now. First, the objective, we will demonstrate the approximation of American Sign Language with the Brazilian deaf students' mother tongue, Libras, through the Hand Talk app. And this is an opportunity to enhance the learning experiences for Brazilian students learning English. We'll start discussing a little bit about the legal framework in regard of the inclusion of deaf students in regular schools. Many countries have established legal frameworks to ensure the inclusion of students with disabilities, including those who are deaf or hard of hearing. These laws emphasize the right to education, non-discrimination, reasonable accommodations, and accessibility in education settings. For this matter, Lodi and Gasser state that inclusion is not just a matter of placing deaf students in regular schools, but rather providing the necessary support and resources to ensure their full participation and equal opportunities for learning. And this is our utmost concern regarding these students. Oftentimes, most often than not, they are just included in the classroom, but they are left behind the other students in terms of learning. And this is particularly problematic when we're talking about a foreign language like English. In this regard, governments, including the Brazilian one, express a level of awareness about the situation and try to legislate on the matter. There is a well-established policy for the inclusion of these students in regular schools based on several legal documents. We have the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities from the United Nations, and also for Brazilian population, we have the Special Education Policy from the perspective of inclusive education, and also the Brazilian Inclusion Law, in addition to the Federal Constitution and the LDB, Lei de Diretrizes e Bases in Brazil, among others. When in school, these students usually have an individualized education plan or IEP. In other words, deaf students often have individualized education plans that outline the specific accommodation services and supports tailored to their unique needs. These plans may include the use of sign language interpreters, assistive listening devices, captioning services, note-taking assistance, and modifications to teaching strategies or materials. Of course, all of this is pretty much dependable on the resources of the school, of the state, of the country, which have those students under their tutelage. Beyond the IEP, other aspects have to be considered in the inclusion of deaf students in regular schools. We're going to see a few of them: the communication options, different communication methods, sign language, spoken language with hearing aids or cochlear implants, or a combination of both. Schools need to consider the communication preferences and abilities of each student. Support services, especially trained teachers of the deaf, speech language pathologists, and educational interpreters. These professionals work collaboratively with classroom teachers, and also peer interaction and socialization. Interaction and socialization with the hearing peers, aiming social and emotional development, fostering friendships, and enhancing overall integration within the school community. For the Brazilian population, there's this scenario over here, about 8% of the population with different types of deficiency. Among them, we have about 32% with visual impairment, 25% with auditory impairment. Then we have the physical superior, about 16%, the physical inferior, about 15%, and different types of mental issues, about 5%. In Brazil, deaf students are taught to be speakers of Libras. This is the Brazilian Sign Language, legally recognized language in Brazil with the passage of law 10,436 in 2002. It relies on manual signs, facial expressions, body movements, and spatial references to convey meaning. And nowadays, there are about 36% of speakers of Libras among people that can hear at all. The deaf students and the teaching of English in the regular school. There are several aspects to be considered when we think about teaching English for deaf students, and we're going to highlight 10 of them. Let's start with visual communication, sign language, visualizing spoken English, multisensory approach, and captioned materials. Well, first, the use of visual supports such as visual cues, Diagrams, pictures, and videos can enhance comprehension and reinforce language concepts. Also, sign language can be used to introduce vocabulary, explain concepts, and reinforce language structures. Visual aids, facial expressions, and body language are used to convey meaning. Additionally, demonstrating mouth movements and phonetic patterns can assist in understanding pronunciation and speech sounds. Moreover, incorporating visual, tactile, and kinesthetic activities to enhance language acquisition is possible, for instance, using manipulatives, acting out scenarios, and incorporating hands-on activities. Also, the caption materials provide visual reinforcement and facilitate comprehension among these students. Other important 5 aspects include the collaboration with deaf education specialists, visual feedbacks and assessments, deaf culture and identity, assistive technology, and individualized instruction. In detail, deaf education specialists provide guidance on adapting materials and ensuring accessibility for deaf students. We also think about written assignments, visual projects, or signed presentations that are easier for these students. We incorporate materials that represent deaf authors, deaf history, and deaf perspective. A part that is pretty important for this research is the assistive technology tools such as speech-to-text softwares, video conferencing platforms with live captioning, and educational apps specifically designed for deaf learners can support their engagement and comprehension of English language. And finally, individualized instruction through IEPs or personalized learning plans, PLPs. Now let's talk a little bit about the HandTalk app. This app features a lot of functionalities. It's a mobile application that facilitates communication between hearing individuals and deaf or hard of hearing individuals using Brazilian Sign Language, Libras. This app includes translation and communication, accessibility, Brazilian Sign Language, Libras, avatar-based interface, offline capabilities, awards, and recognition, among others. This app particularly has made significant strides in promoting accessibility and inclusion for the deaf community in Brazil and beyond by providing a tool that facilitates communication between hearing and deaf individuals. The app helps break down communication barriers and fosters a more inclusive society. And in classroom, we can use this app to enhance opportunities for deaf students learning new content. We're going to focus in this case for this research on the English language subject. Research methodology. For this research, we used basically bibliographical research and semi-structured interviews with teachers to get some results about how efficient this app was in helping teachers in the classrooms. All of this work to demonstrate the results of the pedagogical use of the HandTalk app in the school environment for English teaching, as well as the acceptance of teachers and students to the app and to the methodology applied. To highlight the analysis of the research, the first part of the bibliographical research were bound to the legal framework, the federal, state, and municipal ranks. We brought here an example from the Três Lagoas City Council that is aligned with federal and state laws. And it says that the educational system must ensure that people with hearing impairments and speech impairments have access to education, information, and education and the processes, activities, and curricular contents developed in all levels, stages, and modalities of education offered in the area covered by it. Also, we researched a few authors that invested on methodologies, materials, apps, and other assistive technology and approaches that could be used to teach students a foreign language. Here, there's this example from Rodriguez and Lacerda, and the authors discuss that there are a lot of challenges, strategies, and perspectives surrounding the inclusion of deaf students in regular schools. Also, the role of teachers, educators, and other stakeholders in promoting the successful inclusion of deaf students, among others authors discussing this topic. The second part of the analysis included the semi-structured interviews that we conducted with the teachers. In fact, these interviews are being made now because this is a thesis that is ongoing. For now, we can highlight a few main points of the answers the teachers we got so far. About the communication between teachers and deaf students applying this app, the main point of answers included language translation, visual learning support, vocabulary expansion, clarification and reinforcement, classroom engagement, and independent learning support. All of these points were pointed out by teachers in connection with the use of the app in the classroom. Also, we can comment about the communication between the hearing students and the deaf students in the classroom. And the interviewed professors declared that the main points were the bridging the communication gap between these students, the real-time communication, the inclusive group activities that were allowed by the app, the enhanced social interaction, the language learning exchange possible by the translation tools, the increase in the independence of the students that could learn a few things by themselves, and mainly the breakdown of stereotypes and misconception, putting together these two social bubbles. For the concluding remarks, we have the app's real-time translation capabilities have provided deaf students with immediate access to spoken English, facilitating their understanding of lectures, discussions, and instructions. The interactive features of the HandTalk app have empowered students to actively express their thoughts and ideas, fostering a more inclusive learning environment. This app has not only served as a communication tool, but has also acted as a valuable resource for deaf students to improve their language skills. Students could learn new signs and expand their vocabulary at their own pace, and resources has not only supported deaf students' language development, but also boosted their confidence in expressing themselves effectively. Here we have the concluding remarks for the presentation, and we'd like to thank all the organizers of the events and the